The alien queen's voice cut through the air like a blade. Humans, she sneered, her silver eyes glowing with disdain. Fragile, weak and utterly insignificant. How do you even survive? The wind howled through the ruins of what was once a thriving human settlement. Broken buildings stood like skeletal remains, their steel frames jutting into the ashen sky. Fires flickered in the distance, illuminating the desolation left in the wake of the Cryo's empire. The ground was scorched, the air thick with the scent of smoke and despair, and yet despite the devastation, Kale stood his ground, his sharp dark eyes locked onto the towering figure before him. Queen Nixer, regal, ruthless, and deadly, she hovered inches above the ground, her flowing white hair shimmering like woven silver. Her deep blue skin reflected the dim light, her intricate armor pulsing with alien energy. Behind her, rows of Kyo soldiers, massive warriors clad in obsidian armor, stood at attention, their plasma weapons humming softly. Kale exhaled, slowly tightening his fists. He had spent years preparing for this moment, years surviving in the wasteland left behind by the Cryos invasion, watching his people dwindle. Their defiance met with slaughter. The Queen had returned to claim Earth as a resource colony, a mere footnote in the expansion of her empire. But Kale wasn't about to let that happen. He took a step forward, his boots crunching against the rubble. You talk a lot, he said, his voice like steel, but I don't see you doing much other than gloating. Nixer, silver eyes narrowed, brave words for a species that can barely hold its own. Kale smirked. You sure about that? Nixer tilted her head, intrigued by his defiance. She had encountered humans before, pathetic, weak creatures who crumbled at the first sign of true power, yet this one didn't cower. Her lips curled into a sharp smile. You amuse me, human. Tell me, what grand gesture of defiance do you intend? Will you throw rocks at my fleet? Will you beg for mercy before the end? Kale took another step, eyes never leaving hers. No, I'll prove you wrong. The Queen soldiers tensed, ready to strike at her command, but she raised a single hand, stopping them. Interesting, she mused. And how do you propose to do that? Kale rolled his shoulders, muscles rippling beneath his torn shirt. A test, onion one. No weapons, no tricks, just me and your best. He nodded toward the silent ranks of armored Cryos warriors. Let's see just how fragile humans really are. A low murmur rippled through the soldiers. Kale caught the flicker of something in Nix's gaze, curiosity, perhaps amusement. It didn't matter. Nix's laughter rang out, rich and echoing. You challenge my elite guard to a battle with your bare hands? She shook her head, silver eyes gleaming. You truly do not fear death, do you? Kale smirked. No, I fear watching my people suffer while I do nothing. Nixer studied him for a moment. This one was different. He wasn't just reckless, he was dangerous. A fire burned behind his eyes, something she had not seen in the other human survivors. Then she waved her hand dismissively. Very well, human, I accept your challenge. The ground trembled as one of the Kyo's elite warriors stepped forward. He was massive, easy 8 feet tall, his armor bristling with plasma nodes, his fists the size of Kale's head. Kale didn't flinch. Nixer smirked. Defeat him, and I will reconsider Earth's fate. The Cryo's warrior cracked his knuckles, the sound like boulders grinding together. The other soldiers chuckled darkly, already anticipating the human brutal end. Kale exhaled, muscles coiling. This was it. Start whenever you're ready, he said, stretching his neck. I wouldn't want you to say I caught you off guard. The warrior roared, and then with a thunderous charge the battle began. Kale cracked his knuckles, rolling his shoulders as he faced the towering alien. Warrior before him 8-foot-tall black armor. Fists like sledgehammers the cryos. Warrior flexed his massive hands the dull glow of his armor pulsing with every breath his kind were built for war. Enhanced musculature reinforced bones. Superior reflexes against him Kale was. Small fragile human Nick leaned forward. Amusement flickering in her silver eyes. You think we're weak Kale grows stepping into a loose fighting stance let me show you what humans are made of the surrounding cryo soldiers chuckled their deep voices rumbling like distant thunder they had seen this scenario before many times countless species had tried standing against them none had ever lasted long the warrior lunged moving with terrifying speed for something his size Kale barely had a second to act he twisted ducking under a crushing right hook the wind from the swing brushing his face the ground cracked where the Kyo's fist landed the sheer force of the impact sending dust and debris flying Kale pivoted driving his elbow into the alien's exposed ribs. It was like hitting a steel wall but he didn't stop he moved adapted flowed. Weaving between devastating blows. Striking where he could the cryos roared. In frustration Kale was faster not. Stronger but smarter flashback a burning. Sky screams in the distance the cryos. Invasion Kale had been a soldier. Stationed in one of Earth's last. Defensive strongholds he had watched as. The aliens descended from the sky there. Warships blotting out the sun he had. Fought hard but it hadn't mattered the. Cryos crushed every human force that. Stood in their way he remembered. Dragging his sister through the rubble. Her hand limp in his she was barely tan. Coughing from the smoke eyes wide with. Terror then a blast of light Kale. Clenched his fists his present self. Snapping back to reality he wouldn't let. Them take anything else from him not now. Not ever the cryos warrior charged again. Swinging a brutal fist at Kale's head. Kale Sid stepped at the last second. Twisting in close and grabbing the alien's arm he shifted his weight using the Kyo's own momentum against him and with a grunt of effort sent the hulking warrior sprawling to the ground. A moor rippled through the gathered soldiers. Nix's expression sharpened that was unexpected. Kale exhaled rolling his neck. That all you got the cryos warrior. Pushed himself up his black armor. Scratched his pride wounded he snarled. Launching himself at Kale with renewed fury this time Kale wasn't fast enough a fist the size of a boulder smashed into his ribs pain exploded through his body. White hot and suffocating he felt the breath ripped from his lungs as he was sent flying crashing through the remains of a stone pillar. Dust filled the air. The cryo soldiers cheered. Nixer smirked. Ah, there it is humanity's limit. But then the dust shifted. Kale groaned pushing himself up his muscles screaming in protest. His ribs were definitely cracked. Maybe broken didn't matter. He spat blood into the dirt and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Then he grinned. That all you got? He rasped. The cheering stopped. Nix's eyes narrowed slightly. Why was he still standing? Kale took a slow breath. Pain was familiar. Pain meant he was still alive. You're strong he admitted rotating his shoulders. But I've been fighting my whole life. You think a little bruising is enough to stop me? The cryo warrior growled his stance shifting into something more aggressive. Kale adjusted his own stance. Nix's amusement was gone now replaced by something else. Curiosity. This human he was different. She folded her arms. This fight had just begun. Kale's vision blurred at the edges. The pain in his ribs making every breath feel like razor blades slicing through His lungs, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop the Cryo's warrior in front of him. Snarled, advancing again, his strikes came faster now, hammering blows meant to break bone and shatter will. Kale dodged where he could, blocked when he had no choice, but each impact sent fresh agony artling through his body, yet he stayed on his feet. Nixer had expected spectacle, a quick brutal lesson in Kyo's superiority. Instead she was watching something else entirely. Kale should have fallen by now. No other species had lasted this long against one of her elite guards, yet this human, wounded, battered, bleeding, was still fighting, and worse, he was learning. The Cryo's warrior lunged with another crushing right hook, too predictable. Kale shifted at the last moment, dropping low, and swept the alien's leg out from under him. The towering warrior crashed to the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. The other guard stiffened. Kale staggered back, spitting blood into the dirt. His chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. But he grinned. You think this is enough to break me? He rasped, his voice edged with exhaustion and defiance. I've survived worse, the Cryo's warrior roared in frustration, slamming a fist into the ground as he pushed himself back up. But Kale was already moving, using the environment. The battlefield was ruined. Shattered stone, broken pillars, debris everywhere. Good. He backed up toward a collapsed structure, forcing the Kyos to chase him the moment the alien lunged. Kale sidestepped and let the warrior's own momentum drive him head first into a jagged slab of metal. Crack. The Cryos staggered, his helmet fracturing on impact. Kale didn't hesitate. He leapt, wrapping his arm around the alien's thick neck in a choke hold. The Cry thrashed, but Kale held on, tightening his grip like a viper strangling its prey. The Cryo's warrior collapsed. The other soldiers' forward muscles tensed. Kale wiped sweat and blood from his forehead. Who's next? Nixer's silver eyes narrowed. She had been amused before, now for the first time she felt something else. Concern enough, she called, raising a hand. The remaining guards hesitated, then stepped back, reluctant but obedient. Kale exhaled, swaying on his feet. His entire body felt like one giant bruise, but he was still standing, still fighting. Nick Sir descended from her throne, her boots making no sound on the cracked earth. She stopped just a few feet away, studying him. You are unusual human, she said slowly. Kale scoffed, rolling his aching shoulders. What, because I didn't roll over and die? Nick Sir tilted her head. Because you refused to break for the first time. Her voice held no mockery. She had come here expecting weakness. She had found something else entirely. Kale grinned despite the pain. Told you, he said. You don't know a damn thing about us. The wind howled through the ruins. The battle was over, but for the first time in her life Nixo was uncertain who had truly won. The wind whispered through the ruins, carrying the scent of blood and dust. Kale stood tall despite the fire in his ribs, despite the sweat stinging his eyes. Nick Sir stepped forward, her silver eyes reflecting the flickering flames around them. There was something in her gaze, not mockery, not condescension, but something else. Respect. You have proven yourself human, she said, her voice smooth as a blade sliding from its sheath. But this is not the end. Kale exhaled sharply. He had known even before the first punch was thrown that beating her guards wouldn't be enough. It never was. Yeah. Then what happens next? His tone was rough, but there was no bravado in it. Just exhaustion. Nixer studied him, her long white hair shifting in the cold breeze. The Cryo's empire does not abandon its claims so easily, she said. Even I do not hold absolute power. My advisors, my warlords, will not accept this outcome. Kale clenched his jaw, so this was just a game to you. His voice was low, filled with restrained fury, a test to see how long I'd last before you crushed us. Anyway, Nixer hesitated, then to his surprise she looked away. No, she murmured. Kale narrowed his eyes, then why? For the first time the alien queen seemed unsure of herself. She glanced at the bodies of her fallen guards, then back at Kale. Because I needed to understand, she admitted. Kale snorted. Understand what? That we don't break easy. Nix's lips curled slightly. No, I already knew you were stubborn. She took another step closer, close enough that Kale could see the faint scars on her pale skin, hidden beneath the intricate armor. Do you know how many species have stood against the Cryos Empire? She asked. Kale folded his arms. I'm guessing not many. Nixer nodded. Not one has survived. They all break, they all beg, and in the end they all kneel. Her voice softened, as if she were speaking more to herself than to him. But not you, not your kind. She lifted her hand then, and for a moment Kale thought she meant to strike him. Instead, she placed it over her own chest. I once believed that power was everything, that survival meant crushing all opposition. But watching you fight, seeing the fire in your eyes even when you were bleeding in the dirt, she let out a breath. I see now that power alone is not enough. Kale scoffed. Took you long enough. A slow smile tugged at the edges of her lips. Perhaps a silence settled between them, heavy, charged. Then from the skies above, a deep resonating hump filled the air. Kale's stomach dropped. He knew that sound. Warships. Nix Sewer turned, looking up as the massive Cryos fleet descended from the black void. Above the lead ship was enormous, its shadow stretching across the ruins like an omen of death. Sleek black holes, glowing crimson thrusters, weapons primed and ready. Kale clenched his fists. His body was still screaming from the last fight, but it didn't matter if this was how it ended. He'd go down swinging. But then Nixer raised her hand. The fleet halted. Kale's breath caught in his throat. What are you doing? He asked. Nixer didn't turn to face him, making a choice. Silence. Then she spoke again, this time in a language Kale didn't understand. A series of sharp commanding orders, and the fleet obeyed. Weapons powered down. Ships withdrew slightly. The threat remained, but they were holding. Nixer finally turned back to Kale, her silver eyes gleaming in the firelight. I will not let them destroy you, she said. Kale stared at her, his heart pounding. Why? Nix's expression was unreadable. Because you do not deserve to be conquered, you deserve to be fought. Beside, Kale felt something shift inside him. He wasn't sure if it was relief, confusion, or something else entirely, but one thing was certain: the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The night sky burned with the crimson glow of approaching warships. The Kyo's fleet hovered like a storm waiting to break, their weapons primed to reduce Earth to rubble. Kale stood beside Nix, battered but unbowed, his fists clenched, his breathing steady despite the fire in his ribs, his eyes locked onto the enemy above, burning with defiance. You called us fragile, he said, voice rough yet unwavering, but today we'll show you what humanity can do. Nixer turned to him, her silver eyes unreadable, then slowly a smirk ghosted across her lips. Let's see if you're right, human. And then chaos erupted. The sky rained fire. The Cryos warships began their descent, beams of plasma scorching the ruined Earth, but the humans were already moving. Kale had spent years surviving in the wastelands. He knew the terrain better than anyone, and now that knowledge would be their greatest weapon. Fall back into the tunnels, he barked into his cowl. Use the debris for cover. Stay mobile, we hit them where it hurts. The resistance fighter spread out, disappearing into the roof ruins like ghosts, makeshift rocket launchers, and scavenge plasma rifles, primitive weapons. Against an empire, but in the right hands. Even rocks could bring giants down. Nixa, meanwhile, had taken to the skies. She was a blur of motion, her silver cloak billowing as she leapt onto one of the descending Kyo's ships with a twist of her wrist. Her twin energy blades ignited, pulsing blue fire against the night. Kale watched as she ripped through the hull like it was paper. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Kale ducked as a plasma blast tore past his head, turning the ground behind him to molten slag. That was close. One of his fighters, Malik, shouted. Kale grinned, breathless. You're welcome for the free haircut. They pressed on, weaving through the crumbling remains of the city. Kyo's troops hit the ground in droves, their armor gleaming, their weapons humming with deadly energy. But they weren't prepared for human unpredictability. The resistance struck from the shadows, using guerrilla tactics. They lured the cryos into narrow corridors, triggered collapses, hacked into their comms to send false orders. For every human that fell, 3 cryos went down with them. Still the battle was turning brutal. A cryo's brute, a towering four-armed warrior, charged at Kale, swinging a plasma axe the size of a car door. Kale stepped at the last second, driving a stolen cryo's blade up between its armored ribs. The alien staggered, its silver blood spraying onto Kale's face. But it wasn't dead yet. It reached for him. Then a flash of blue. Nixer landed beside him, her energy blade cleaving through the brute's skull. In one clean motion she flicked the blood off her blade and smirked. You're getting slow, human. Kale wiped his face. And you're getting dramatic. She laughed, actually laughed. Then her calm crackled. A Kyo's officer's panic voice came through. My queen, we're losing ground. These humans. Nixer lifted her wrist to respond, and what she said next changed everything. Stand down. Earth is no longer an enemy. Is under my protection. Silence. Then one by one the cryo's ships began to withdraw. The remaining ground troops hesitated, uncertain, leaderless. Then they too began to retreat, vanishing back into the night. The battle was over. The war had been won. Kale stood on a hill overlooking the battlefield, his body aching but his spirit soaring. The first rays of dawn painted the ruins gold and red beside him. Nix watched the retreating ships with something almost like relief. You really meant it, Kale said. Earth is safe. Nixer exhaled, her silver eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. For now, she admitted, the Empire will not be pleased. There will be consequences. Kale turned to her. Then what happens next? Nixer studied him for a long moment. Then she smirked. I suppose we fight together. Kale chuckled, shaking his head. Never thought I'd be allies with an alien queen. Nix's gaze turned distant. And I never thought I'd respect a human. She paused, then added, yet here we are. They stood side by side, 2 warriors from opposite worlds, bound now by blood, battle, and something deeper than either of them could yet name. And as the sun rose over the shattered earth, one thing was clear: this was not the end. It was the beginning of something greater.